Today we're talking about low recoil hunting rifles. We're going to talk about why you might want one, when to choose low recoil, which cartridges, what qualifies as low recoil, what influences felt recoil, what causes recoil, and then how to adjust recoil. And this will be both with a gun you might buy or with a gun you already have, and then some gun modifications that will reduce recoil. As far as why you might want a low recoil rifle, well, maybe you just don't like recoil. You know, my first hunting rifle was a 300 Winchester. That's a lot bigger than these other ones here, and I just didn't like shooting it from the bench. You know, you might be a new shooter. I remember stepping up from a 22 long rifle, and I shot a 243, and I thought that was kind of extreme. You know, now it's just normal now that I'm more experienced. If you're smaller, then maybe you'd want a lighter rifle or something that's not going to beat you up so bad. You know, I can really appreciate that. Maybe you don't need a monster round like a 300 Winchester to go shooting where you hunt. I mean, if you're only going to be hunting out to 100 yards, you know, you don't need something big like this. Oh, you could use it, but you don't need it. And then the last reason is some of these light cartridges also come in a really handy small rifle that's easy to carry, easy to manipulate, you know, fast action. Moving on to when to choose a low recoil rifle. Hopefully that happens at the gun store when you're picking out the rifle. Okay, that's the easiest way to get low recoil. There's other ways, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that down here, how you can go from a high recoiling cartridge to a lower recoiling cartridge. But the easiest way to go low recoil is to buy a rifle that's chambered in one of the relatively smaller rounds. So we'll talk about what qualifies as low recoil and which cartridges are low recoil. So if you read some of Colonel Townsend Whelan's work, I think it's out of Small Arms Ballistics, but I'm not positive. He says low recoil is 14 foot-pounds or less. So the recoil generated by the round should be 14 foot-pounds or less. I'll go into what causes that here when we discuss what influences recoil. But his point was if it's 14 foot-pounds or less and you're shooting at a non-moving target, like a paper target, you'll be able to shoot for a long time without getting any recoil fatigue. And that's what you want. You want to be able to shoot a bit to get familiar with your rifle, and then when you go out and hunt with it, then you'll have a lot of confidence. So now, which cartridges qualify as low recoil? Now, most things in the 308 Winchester family can be low recoil. This is a 308 Winchester. If you neck down this neck so it takes a 7mm bullet, then it's a 7mm.8, and then if you neck that down to 6mm, then you've got a 243 Winchester, and the 6mm Remington is basically the same thing. You choose between 243 and 6mm by which brand of rifle you use. Now in between here, which I don't have, is a 260, which takes instead of a 7mm bullet, takes 6.5mm. So all of these can be low recoil rounds. The 308 Winchester is kind of marginal for low recoil. Moving up, you can go with a 270. The 270 doesn't really qualify as low recoil if you go with that 14 foot-pound rule, unless you load it down a little bit. 300 Winchester, definitely not low recoil, but again, we'll talk about how you can download the 300 Winchester so it's not too bad. So take-home message from this: if you want low recoil, go with a 243 or a 7mm.8. Some of the 308 Winchester rounds can be low recoil, and a 270 can kind of be low recoil. It's very easy to look at stats and go from 243, oh, I want a heavier bullet, I want a faster bullet, and you get yourself talked into a 300 Winchester mag. And then you go get beat up at the range by your 300 Winchester mag while you're sighting in the rifle. That's no fun. So try not to get too worked up about how big you need to go. Any of the smaller cartridges are going to work great, especially inside 200 yards. A lot of folks will go big game hunting and make shots within 200 yards. So you're not really limited by low recoil rounds. If you don't trust me, go get one of the spear reloading manuals. and read up on the cartridge descriptions. Okay, you don't need the number 14 manual. Any of them, most of them have the same description, and you will see rounds like the 300 Savage, rounds like the 257 Roberts. All of those are classic hunting rounds that people love to shoot and will knock deer down. The 7mm .8 here, which falls between 300 Winchester and the 243. This is a really neat cartridge. This cartridge is almost identical ballistically to the 7x57 Mauser. The 7x57 Mauser is a classic hunting rifle. So if you want to go in and read some of Jack O'Connor's work here, remember Jack O'Connor was synonymous with the 270 Winchester. Well, he didn't just shoot the 270 Winchester. One of the other cases he really liked was the 7x57 Mauser. If you want to make sure you have a little bit more gun to go big game hunting, the 7mm .8 is going to work for you. Now, similarly, Jack O'Connor talks about the 270 Winchester, and he shot something like 18 elk and a bunch of moose with the 270, and he only had one get away. If you've ever shot a deer with the 270, you know how effective that can be. So you're not handicapping yourself at all shooting a 270. And according to Jack O'Connor, the 7x57, which is just the same as the 7mm .8, is also a great round. So let's look at some of the cartridges we've been discussing. Just for comparison, 223 Remington, coming in at 3.5 foot-pounds of recoil. Pretty light recoiling. This is kind of the bullet range for hunting deer-sized game. So deer, you know, a 90 to 100 grain bullet for deer, 7.5, 8.5 foot-pounds of recoil. Pretty light recoil. 70 grain really for a varmint's 6.5 foot-pounds. Weight on bullets you might hunt deer with, 120 and 140. You're looking at 11 to 12 foot-pounds of recoil. The 7mm .8, 140 grains, 175 grains. Jack O'Connor talked about the 7x57 shooting 175s. That was a load that he liked. 140 grain, that would work just fine too. So we're talking 13 foot-pounds with a 140 grain bullet. So that's still within our low recoil range. 175 gets you into the 14s, so that's kind of marginal by this 14 foot-pound definition. The 308 Winchester, you can get pretty light bullets for shooting deer, 125 grains. That puts you in at 13 foot-pounds. Still low recoil at that point. You can go up 150 foot-pounds of recoil. That's typically what people shoot for deer. 165 grain, that works for deer, or a lot of the target bullets are 168 grains. So basically the same thing. At that point you're getting up into the range where you might start to feel the recoil if you're recoil sensitive. 180 grain bullet definitely does not qualify under this definition of low recoil. 25-06, that's a 30-06 neck down to take a 25 caliber bullet. So these things shoot pretty flat. 100 grain bullet, 120 grain bullet. This is on par with the 270 Winchester. You're talking 11, 12, maybe 13 foot-pounds of recoil with that. That's a lot of knockdown power with very low recoil. 270 Winchester, great round. 130 grain bullet, doesn't really qualify as a low recoil round. I personally like this round, 130 grains. I don't get recoil fatigue at 15 foot-pounds. But still, it does not meet the definition of 14 foot-pound recoil. 30-06, we're talking 17 to 20 foot-pounds of recoil. So 30-06, definitely not low recoil. Now, here's a couple others that I put in just for comparison. 7 mag and 300 mag. These are members of the Magnum Club. You're looking at 18 or 19 foot-pounds coming out of a 7 mag. That's on par with 30-06. So higher recoiling but not too bad. 300 Winchester Mag, 150 grain, 180 grain. 24 to 27 foot-pounds of recoil. That's a lot. That's why it kicks so much more than the 30-06. You got a lot you have the same bullets coming out a whole lot faster, and there's a lot of powder behind them. So one of the things about the short mags is you get higher velocities with a lighter weight bullet, but there's less powder, and that does influence recoil. So let's talk about what influences felt recoil. Basically, the fit of the stock can help. You know, if the stock doesn't fit you well, it can hit you in the cheek, or it might not fit on your shoulder all that great. That can make the rifle feel worse to shoot. The easiest way to reduce recoil is to put a softer butt pad on the back of the rifle. That's something you can do, or a gunsmith can do. And then you want to make sure you're wearing some clothing. You know, if you go out and shoot in a t-shirt, you know, you might feel the recoil a little bit more than, say, if you go out and shoot with a winter coat on. You can buy shoulder pads. They're a little awkward to wear, so I don't know if I'd go that route. Target shooting, that's fine. Hunting might be a little awkward. So those are the three things that influence recoil: the fit of the rifle, the butt pad, and then how much clothing you have. Moving on to what causes recoil. This is just physics. It's momentum transfer. Okay, it's the speed of the bullet leaving the rifle, it's the weight of the bullet leaving the rifle, and it's how much powder is packed behind that bullet. And then that's what's going out, and then the rifle's coming back at you. That's the felt recoil. So the rifle weight also influences how much recoil you get out of there. So speed of the bullet, weight of the bullet, weight of the powder in the cartridge, and then weight of the gun. Those are the four things that causes recoil. Now let's talk about how to adjust recoil. Okay, so once you buy the gun, you're locked in. You got a cartridge, you got a weight of the gun. That's what you're using. So let's talk about. So to adjust recoil in that rifle, here are some steps you can do. If you don't hand load, one option is to go with Remington here. They've got a managed recoil product line. So all of the standard cartridges in reduced recoil loads. So that's one option. Another option, if you don't want to go managed recoil and you want factory rounds, you buy a lighter weight bullet. You figure out what's the lightest weight bullet I can use and still take the game I want. You know, you can go with a 125 grain bullet in a 308. You can go with a 90 or 95 grain bullet in a 243. You know, a 7mm odd 8. You know, go with your lighter bullet. Go with 140 grains. So that will reduce the felt recoil. If you're into hand loading, you've got a lot more opportunities here. You can take any rifle load and you can download it to the minimum, the starting load in your hand loading book, and you'll reduce recoil a little bit because you're reducing the powder and you're reducing the velocity. You can also go with a lighter weight bullet, same as with factory loads. Or you go to Hodgins' website, H4895, Reduced Rifle Loads. This talks about how to reduce the H4895 loads down so that they're safe to use, but they're low recoil. And they've got loads for the 243 Winchester, 7x57 Mauser, 7M8, 270. All the bullets chosen here are designed to perform well at lower velocities. It says in this packet that they were developed for using with handguns. So they knew they were using lower velocities, so they chose bullets that would have lower velocities. This is a sheet that you can download from Hodgins, and it'll tell you how to do this. And I did the math on these for some of the standard cases I'm talking about in this video, and a lot of them come in under 10 foot-pounds. Even the 300 Winchester came in at just under 10 foot-pounds. So that's pretty amazing for a 300 Winchester. So that thing is normally more than twice that. Well, here's the recoil out of those Hodgins loads that I mentioned. And here you're looking at anywhere from 4 to 9, almost 10 foot-pounds of recoil. So this is pretty cool. You can take your 300 Winchester mag or your 7 mag, you can choose the lighter weight bullet, you can download it pretty low, and you're still generating less than 10 foot-pounds of recoil. So there are options if you have one of these monster cartridges that will get you down to managed recoil. Finally, let's talk about gun modifications. There's some things that you can do that will make your gun recoil less. So we already talked about a butt pad, putting on a real soft butt pad like a Packmeyer, something like that. That will reduce your felt recoil a little bit. Another common thing that people do a lot of is go with a muzzle brake. That's kind of a deal with the devil because muzzle brakes are extremely loud. People don't like you shooting next to them at the range because they get the concussion from the muzzle brake. You don't really want to take one of these things hunting because it's just going to pound your eardrums. In my opinion, no muzzle brakes on hunting rifles. And then the last thing that you can do, which is really kind of uncommon, is you can get what's called a Mercury Plug or some sort of weight with a spring on it. And you have a gunsmith or do it yourself, you put it in the rifle stock. And what that will do is slow down the rifle as it moves rearward, so it'll give you a little less felt recoil.